So when we're here today, we're talking about guilt, we're talking about shame, we're talking about regret and remorse, we're talking about correct practice most of all, and how those qualities can fit in, and whether or not they do right here and right now. A few friends in the chat today, it's what? Here in the West Coast in America, it's Sunday morning at 1 a.m. on the 15th of February. But some friends have been talking about in their practices encountering some remorse, some regret about things that they've done in the past that they wouldn't like to do again. And so talking about how regret and remorse fit into correct practice would be to reframe it, to go ahead and get rid of those personalized qualities of, I'm the person that did this, I regret it very much, and rather come down to those qualities that are helpful in this moment. A seeing of what fits right here, right now. One of the friends here was talking about this word with the idea and quality of non-judgment, meaning basically not picking and choosing on things like that, not assigning personalizations to these qualities, rather seeing them as they are so that we can deal with them in a non-harmful manner, a way that doesn't hurt us and doesn't hurt others now or later on. Someone talked about going to the bar as an example. The reason that we go to the bar is getting caught up in excitement about whatever it is that we think it is that's going to happen at the bar or after or somewhere in between or whatever. But it's most often not the liquor itself. It's most often not anything having to do with the loud environment, clumsy things everywhere, lots of people pushing and pulling and doing all kinds of stuff around you. Most of the time it has some idea to it that we've become excited about, that we've started to grasp at, and that we've carried on with to the point that now, like one of our friends talked about, we've become intoxicated to the point of heedlessness. And so we wake up the next day, we have a headache, eyes are stuffy, all this sort of thing. And how many times do we have to do that until we recognize that it's just not something that is worthwhile anymore? It's simply not worth getting excited about that process, regardless of what it is. The content is really irrelevant. Whether we're going to the bar or this, that, or the other thing, what we're really talking about is engaging in distraction. So when we talk about engaging in distraction, such as the distraction of having a big story about regret and remorse, rather than engaging in our right effort, which is to go ahead and abandon those unwholesome qualities that we're sitting around telling stories about being remorseful for, and give rise to wholesome qualities in their place and sustain them so that we don't have to go ahead and tell these stories anymore to begin with. We actually stop, we correct the bad behavior. Something a good friend of mine had told me one time was quite simply that this is one of the best ways that they had ever been apologized to, was to have the person correct their behavior. You can make all the statements that you want, and it's nice to make nice statements, but it's much nicer to go ahead and make an actual change to the activity that brings about, the offensive behavior, whether it's offensive to oneself or others. So if we're drinking to the point that, it's hurting and we don't want to do it anymore, then making that change is much nicer. And in order to do that, we can look at that regret and that remorse, and rather than dwelling in it, rather than spending time in that distraction, we can come in line with our intention, our actual thought that's in line with the way that we want to practice right now. Practicing being okay right now leads to being calm. Being calm, we're not excited about drinking. We're not excited about getting intoxicated on something else to the point of heedlessness. Rather, we're actually developing quite the interest in calming down and getting rid of excitement and interest in these sorts of things and these sorts of activities. And in order to do that, we need to be able to pay attention. We need to be able to watch what it is that's going on and see how it is that things do or don't fit in this moment. So when we talk about regret and remorse, we can talk about them simply as reminders. Yes, please. Please mic on too if you'd like.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know how to I don't know where the emojis are on
Oh yeah.
or whatever.
I don't either. It's okay.
So something I've learned from this group is to sort of not make plans as much as possible, or let go of planning. And I have that personality that loves to make plans. So that's been really helpful in some ways, and in many ways, I'd say. But sometimes I find with like habits, like we talk about going to the bar or whatever, and that's not something that particularly draws me in today, but there are certain things that do draw me in that are not, that are distractions.
Yeah.
And I find sometimes that I need or I benefit from like having this resolve of like for the next 30 days I'm going to go cold turkey on something, because if I don't have that kind of future thinking of like I'm going to go cold turkey on something for 30 days, then I just don't have the drive today to do the thing. Like I forget the reason why, I'm doing something. I forget it's that kind of, I lack that purpose to show wise restraint on like bad, whatever that might be. I mean, one that I've done many times is like stop scrolling YouTube or like unnecessarily scrolling YouTube. And if I've had that resolve of like, okay, for December I'm going to avoid all YouTube, I actually managed to do it. But then as soon as I stop that, that challenge, I then kind of let it creep back in. And so I just interested to get your thoughts on how do you get that balance between, yeah, like committing to something and maybe seeing the future consequences of it and setting yourself some kind of goal or target versus, not, versus still at the end of the day practicing in the moment and everything that comes with that.
Yes, of course. That's a very wonderful thing to talk about. Thank you for bringing that up. What I would say is quite simply that when we see that we're doing this thing and we have this cycle of doing this thing, and we have this idea in mind, like you were talking about intention, we have this idea in mind that we're practicing to be okay right now. This is in line with what the Buddha talked about. The Buddha talked pretty explicitly about dukkha, dukkha, nirodha. This is what he told Dhammarato. This is what we're in. This is our business right here, is seeing our dukkha and quenching our dukkha. And so having said that, when we talk about committing to something, if we commit to that, we see the answer is really, really pleasant, really easy, really simple. When we have these ideas of 30 days of this or whatnot, that's well and good. There's no problem with that idea. There's no problem with doing that. If you don't want to use YouTube, you don't want to use YouTube. If you're successful in not using YouTube, congratulate, celebrate. That's excellent. That's a really wonderful thing to do. Let's do that now, so if we're doing that now, then we stop losing this idea. We stop having this idea of wanting things to play out on some schedule, if that makes sense. And so the beautiful thing about a plan, anytime I've ever planned for anything, the most wonderful thing about planning is that it is now, always. And so when I'm planning for something, and this includes, because part of my planning, or we could say a cycle of operations, even includes looking and assessing, and then reassessing, looking again. And so this is actually the beauty of the plan. Let's plan now. So 30 days is nice, but isn't it nice to be off YouTube now? So this is one of the ways that we come back from that. It's not as if the planning is bad or anything like that. Quite simply, if we plan, we do it now, and it doesn't become something that we have to carry around us, if that makes sense. That's one of the beauties of, again, of a plan, is that it's living like this. It's adaptive. It doesn't, that iteration of this plan that was developed, it doesn't survive, contact with this moment. This moment really shreds it to pieces. And so if I want that plan to be effective, I want to see how it fits right here, right now, and modify it, as needed again and again. This is really just an idea that we have when we talk about a skill like process control, even, So, and this is the idea, is we're taking it from this 30-day idea and we're bringing it into right here, right now, because we see that when we calm that excitement about things in general, for example, whether it's YouTube or what have you, we can see clearly in this moment whether or not we want to, based off this intention we have of, being non-harmful, of being okay right now, of being happy right now in this moment. We can see whether or not that action, whether it's of thought, speech, or body, is one that we actually want to carry out. And you can see that this is incredibly liberating. This is actually what people would describe as autonomy and spontaneity. It's restorative, in that when we pay attention, it brings us into, and this is what the Buddha would talk about as right knowledge and right liberation, autonomy and spontaneity. When we have mental composure, when we put first things first, when we calm that excitement. A way to talk about excitement would be that thirst, that craving. That's one of the reasons the bar is a nice way to talk about it, is that word tanha often gets translated as thirst. Another way to talk about it is excitement, getting excited about things, wanting to take them up and carry them about and take them real personally. And so when we calm that first and foremost, we see that, oh, the plan was nice. Yeah, the plan is basically a good example of our ability to plan. to do something and to get a future result. And we've done that again and again and again and again. That's the way of the world, is to do this thing now, hoping that this thing will come later. Well, when it does, like you said, something creeps in one way or another. And like I said, content irrelevant, doesn't matter. Something creeps in because we're still thinking in terms of doing things to get things. And so when we talk about practice like that, that practice of calming and being okay right now is what allows for what we would call clear sight. So when we talk about this in terms of Dhamma, we talk about this as something like samatha vipassana, and this is why the Buddha says anapanasati it's samatha vipassana. It's a calming and a seeing, calming and a seeing. And as we see things as they are, that helps us to calm that just that much more, so we can see that this is again that cycle that builds on itself. It takes us out of, yeah, sure, sorry about that. It takes us out of the process of doing something now to get something later and into, a moment where path and fruit are both present here right now together. We're not doing something now to get it later. We're getting the immediate benefit of that direct path of practice. So not to say that not being on YouTube for 30 days is dukkha, it is what it is. It's not being on YouTube for 30 days. And what we're talking about practicing is, being okay with that, being okay with that being just what it is, which is a plan. I mean, I can't think of a reason why I would like absolutely have to go on YouTube myself, but for some reason something does, and it would be nice to reevaluate. So one of the best ways we can plan is to plan to look again. And that's what we would call that fourth noble truth of the path. The duty to that fourth noble truth is for it to be developed, for it to be done again and again. What are we doing again and again? Looking and seeing and changing and remembering, and those three factors are going over all those factors of the Noble Eightfold Path again and again. So when we talk about planning, that's what I would like to say is I plan to do it again. I plan to look and see again, you know. And it,
Alex, this
yes,
sorry.
please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so it I had a kind of similar question, and you kind of answered it with this idea of, you're just planning to look again. Because something that came up for me, whether it be that I've been to the bar the night before, or if I've lied to somebody, or if I've ran my mouth a bit too much and started gossiping. These kind of things that, because I like at this point, which is when I first started to read about these kind of precepts and things, I was very much like, oh, what? This is just some like rules that they're trying to give me. What is this? But then when I
Right.
actually when I started investigating it myself, I'm like, wow, yeah, these activities, they just lead to a whole lot of problems for me, and like future like issues, and that's why they're bad or unwholesome. Like, but so something that I notice is that after I do one of these things, so partly there's the secondary unwholesome thoughts of like we spoke about, like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. But then it's also this like future kind of thing where it's like, um for instance, oh, I really need to make sure that I don't lie next time. But it's like there is no next time because I'm just here now. And same with like going to the bar, like a lot of the thoughts are something like, oh, well, next Friday I got to make sure that I don't go to the bar because I don't know what, like right now I feel okay with not going to the bar and I don't want to go to the bar right now. But next Friday, I don't know if I'm going to feel like that. Maybe
Mhm.
I'll forget all about this last Friday. And when my friend asked me, like, yeah, why not? So
Right.
that's something that came up. Like, this future kind of like worry over the future, like am I going to be in this same mindset in the future where I can not get wrapped up in it?
Right. And you can see that that's actually we could say a distracted line of thought, because it's actually
Mm,
not what will bring you out of, any idea of stress now or later on to worry about these future states. This is why when we look at the suttas, it talks about handling these moments. Our friend Paul pointed it out the other week. I really enjoyed it. One by one as they occur, not as they have occurred, not as they might occur, not as they might be occurring elsewhere, even if it is right now, but right here, right now, one by one, as they occur. This is how we practice. Bam, bam. And you can see that when we get into this way of being, this way of practicing, this way of looking and seeing and changing, that it becomes something of a rhythm in and of itself. It may be a different rhythm, we could say, than one that we had been playing before, but it is still a rhythm, so it's a skill that can be practiced and cultivated and developed, to include this skill of, like you had talked about before the robot came online, never mind, start again. This is a skill. This is actually the skill of abandoning an unwholesome quality. Never mind, start again. Never mind, start again. Oh, I see that. I don't have to do that right now. Never mind, start again. And when we practice like that, what we're doing is we're coming out of the distracted trains of thought. We're coming off of them. We're no longer riding them to who knows where. They never actually have this destination that we think they're going to have. That's an appointment that we set with a future that just never shows up. And so even these thoughts of like, oh, next week I have to, well, when the person that doesn't want to eat the cookies at 3 a.m. is in the grocery store buying cookies, they're likely thinking quite explicitly about how they're not going to eat those cookies at 3 a.m. And very often they then wake up to find themselves in the kitchen with cookie crumbs, and so then at that point, it's a matter of, okay, where do I want to catch it? Do I want to catch it when I'm telling myself fibs, like you had said, in the past I've lied to someone? Well, at the grocery store, I lied to myself when I said I didn't want to eat the cookies at 3 a.m. because I was judgmental about eating the cookies. I tried to conceal that from myself. So instead, I bought some cookies. I started eating them at 3 a.m. The cookies aren't really a problem. The cookies aren't really a problem at all, but you can see how this is actually a good example of how people can generate and maintain this stress, rather than calming things, because it's really, like we talked about, the cookies are not a big deal. You don't want to eat 30 cookies, buy one cookie. You don't want to eat any cookies, you buy no cookies. You want to be on YouTube, you open the YouTube app. If you don't, you don't. And it really, when we let it calm, it really can be that simple. It's that excitement that brings forth this carrying forward of these, we could say, storylines, like you had talked about. Next week, Friday, I got to pay attention. And you know how to pay attention. You've been paying attention, and you know how quickly we can go from nah to yeah, and especially in the face of something that reminds us of how things were, like a good friend, and it doesn't mean that the friend is bad because we don't want to be drunk. It means quite simply that when the friend's face pops up and the familiar voice pops up and all these memories, these recognitions or perceptions are coming up in the mind, and there's a lot of excitement, and even some excitement that we could call fear about being rejected by the friend if we don't go along with them or whatever. We can see that calming that down allows us to see clearly in that moment what it is that we want to do, and then with that we can see that that intention that we have is not really damaged, it's not flawed, this intention of non-harm, this intention of I want to be okay. What actually gets in the way of that intention bringing forth what we could call the fruit, that is like a noble mind, whether it's a member of the laity or the bhikkhu sangha, you know that is that excitement, that craving, that ignorant wanting for things to be different from how they are right now. That's what gets in the way. So that's what the Buddha's talking about when he talks about this mind being luminous, that it's only adventitious defilements that obscure that, and so what that means when we talk about adventitious is nothing to be taken personally. They're not me, they're not mine, they're not really anything themselves, there's nothing to them. So let's clear them out of the way. That's that calming, and stopping, we could say, really is another word we could use there. And then seeing things just as they are, like the friend, probably not going to lose the friend if we say, nah, not tonight. Thank you though, and if we do, that's probably also okay if the intention is to stop going to the bar because we find that activity harmful for one reason or another. Because guess what? Anytime that you take a hike, you can hike right back the other direction as well. So none of those things that we talk about and get so scared of as being, permanent, whether it be a rejection or a modification in behavior or whatever else, nothing to be worried about. We can always go on a return hike. So, and the Buddha never asks us to give up anything that we're not happy to give up. That's one of the reasons he talks so often about the joy of renunciation, not the the sorrowful, woeful, oh God, I don't want to put it down yet. There's no reason to rush things. We can take our time, we can calm it on down and see that, hey, this is actually okay. And in that way, we come right back to the development of that quality of non-judgment as well. Non-judgment for ourselves, non-judgment for others, and that makes it really nice and easy to see how things fit now, which is always a great reminder to look again as well. So you can see this is what we're doing is we're putting together these actions that bring about these results, each time that we do these sorts of things. So when we practice correctly, we're actually calming down that activity. We're calming down that action, especially that action of construction. And we see that the foundation's not very stable, not very stable. So it makes more sense to live light.
Is the idea that if I'm able to catch my unwholesome thoughts right now and be okay right now, then I can have the confidence that next Friday I can do the same thing.
Boom. And every moment that you remember in between then. And that's why the Buddha praised such things like the practice of anapanasati, because anapanasati oftentimes is thought about as some idea of my breath is going to do something. But when we look at the Pali there, what we're really looking at is the word sati, which, like we talked about earlier, has this meaning of keeping in mind the Dhamma, remembering to practice correctly, in line with the teachings of the Buddha. Okay, this is sati, anapana, breathing in and out. So sati, anapanasati is breathing in and out with mindfulness. Okay, so breathing in and out, remembering the Dhamma, in and out breath is what we're talking about. So when we're talking about remembering the Dhamma with each in and out breath, we see how this naturally leads to, an abandonment of distraction and an arising of qualities like confidence, because I'm looking now, because I'm practicing right now and getting the value of that correct practice right now, I know directly, which is the third noble truth in its duty, is to you yourself make the stress stop. You do it personally, so this is actually the third noble truth in its duty. They talk about those three turnings, and that third turning is I did it, and because you did it, you see how to do it again, and so you develop doing it again and again and again. And so that's what we're talking about, is that calming and doing it now, which then brings about these also very nice, wholesome qualities to keep in mind. Mindfulness being the controller, but you definitely touched on one of those qualities, which is very helpful in remembering to look again, which is confidence. Because you saw directly what it means to look and see what's here right now, and because you saw directly what it means to make a wholesome change and quench dukkha, you know that if you do that again, often, not all the time, but often, then more likely than not, you're going to catch those intermediate thoughts, those nice flashes of video and voice that lead one to actions of speech and body, like going and beating oneself around for one reason or another. But if we see those thoughts beforehand and we see that they're not in line, we see that because we're investigating and utilizing discernment. Utilizing discernment is another way to talk about the wisdom that is that second bit of noble right viewing. We have investigation of things and discernment. And discernment is seeing what does and doesn't fit right now. What is and is not kusala here in this moment. We could also say it's seeing what is and is not the path. And when we look and we see right here, right now, that's why noble right viewing is the forerunner. It comes first. Because when we do that, we see what it is to do right now. We see that it is to practice correctly. We see that it is to remember to do it again.
And so it's coming back to that analogy of going to the bar. You're sat there on Saturday morning thinking, oh my God, you feel like you've got that compulsion to sort of beat yourself up, and you feel like it's necessary. Like, I think why people do it, right, is they think I need to beat
There you go. That's right.
I
Yeah, they
don't,
think that.
then I won't, then I'll crack next Friday. But actually what you're saying is it's whether you're able to resist whatever that urge is the following Friday. It's really depends on your capacity to resist it will be determined by how you live your life Monday to Thursday and Friday itself. And and if you've built up, if you're applying mindfulness and whatnot during the week, And then your capacity to do that from Monday to Friday will depend on how you start today on Sunday, right? So it's kind of like, that's how you
Always
build.
right now.
Yeah,
Every
always.
time I wake up tomorrow, it is today. Every time. It has not failed me yet. So I don't even need to worry about tomorrow, because when I wake up tomorrow, it's going to be today. It's one something here. So it'll still be today. I'll go to sleep today. I'll wake up today, And that's the thing about it, is when we stop with the idea of this time bound quality, then that's how we get the immediacy of things as they are right here, right now, So when we stop with the activities that are, let's say, putting things off, constructing things out, making this whole plan and other such things that makes it so that there's all this stuff to do. When we calm that activity down, then that is the way that we can see clearly what it is. Do we want to make that plan right now? Is it even really necessary to go in that direction? Or would that be something that I would have done out of, we could say, anxiety? And this is why when we talk about correct practice, the first thing that we want to do when we get into seclusion physically is come out of those distractions. They're often called the nivarana, the hindrances, but we like to call them distractions as well, because it makes it very clear that they're not problems to be solved. They're not qualities to be taken personally and molded. They're actually simply distractions to be abandoned again and again. So when we come out of the world and we see that it's there in the mind still, and we're abandoning these ideas of planning, then it's not because the planning is bad, but quite simply it's because it just doesn't fit with what's there right now. The reason that we got into seclusion like that is to go ahead and sit there and calm down, to not bring up further distracted thought. Yes, right. Tomorrow will worry about itself. Yes, precisely. Yeah, it does it just fine. I don't have anything to do. And so that's the wonderful thing about it. And as we recognize that kind of planning, it can remain dynamic with all these other things. Like you talked about a balance, and a balance is great. And in engineering, there's a principle of dynamic balance. We could call it having one's sea legs. There's all of these things that are going around bumping into each other. How do we go ahead and remain upright throughout that? And again, it comes back to looking and seeing, look and see how it is that makes sense to walk right now. It's different. When the boat is swaying heavily, the right way to walk than it is when things are very calm. One way, walk one way, the other time you'll fall right over. And so the idea of looking and seeing what it is that's going on is a great reminder to go back to thinking of things in terms of not a big deal, inconstant, not to be relied upon, you know, not a problem to be dealt with, but rather something to be handled with calm and ease. And when we come back to the development of these qualities immediately, rather than having a plan to develop them along the way by, starting on Sunday, and then I'll have this amount of time to go and I'll be mindful here in the morning with the dishes. Then the mindfulness will stop during the morning routine with yelling at the neighbor, and I'll come back to being mindful afterwards. Whereas when we do this in these short spurts like this, like we talk about getting into seclusion like that 4, 5, 6 times a day, 5-10 minutes at a time, what we're really doing is practicing so that when we come out of it and the mind immediately tries to dive right back into the gutter, thinking that, oh, time to practice is done, which is not a thought that is in line with our intention. If our intention is to practice correctly, correct practice is to stop asking when we are going to be done taking care of ourselves. We can see that that's a silly thought. Oh, when will I be done taking care of myself? Why would we want to be done taking care of ourselves? That's not a question that a sane person would ask. And so when we calm down the excitement, we can see quite simply that, we don't have to be done taking care of ourselves. That really right now, taking care of ourselves right here, quite good enough, and that by looking and seeing what's present in this moment and what fits and what doesn't, we can actually go ahead and take the best care of ourselves, because we can go ahead and quench that stress that is the source of all the problems. To put effort to practice is halfway changing, not a failure. Yes, not sure. Not any reason to talk about things in terms of failure and success. This is another idea that's going to come back around and have its heyday the other way. So rather than talking about things in terms of failure or success, we could just talk about calming down, relaxing. And so in that way, we can let go of those ideas about failure and success.
And Alex, so being
Mhm.
able to spot these unwholesome thoughts and kind of um, uh, getting this kind of intuition for what is unwholesome and why, is this something that it sounds kind of silly now that I say it aloud, but uh, is this something that becomes more like natural and intuitive over time? Because, for instance, particularly with this concept of like self and like the aggregates, um, that's something that at this stage is still quite conceptual for me. Like, okay, like why am I worried that I just said this silly thing, or why
Hmm.
am I worried that I um that I look bad because I didn't shave last night or something like that, you know? Like it's still for me right now it's still quite conceptual, like, oh well that's just me clinging to form or that but is that something that sort of becomes a bit more like right away, like yeah, I see that.
Yes, absolutely. It's a skill to be developed. The looking and the seeing and the discerning and the changing, these are skills to be developed, And so that's why we practice often, that's why we make much of these things. We repeat them again and again and again, because the repetition is the big deal here. Each time that we repeat it, we could say that's a process of iteration. So we could also talk about it in terms of something nice and simple like pushing a kid on a swing. At first, when we go to push a kid on a swing, we may have to put forth what feels like it's perceived as quite a bit of effort. It's not really very effortful, it's pushing a child on a swing, but that's one of those things that's in the eye of the beholder, and especially when we start to compare it to other things, as we get some movement, and the child moves through the arc of the swing, they can pick up their speed and whatnot, and the effort is lesser. And lesser and lesser. If
Mhm.
you can teach the child to pump its knees, and kick its way through the swing, then all you're really doing is watching, giving little taps, and it's really not that big of a deal. You see, there's really nothing much to watching a kid swing. It's actually really easy peasy. Just basically you're looking to see, is it going to launch itself out, and if it did, help it, don't care for it. How nice. You want to swing again, swing again. So this is the thing about it, is when we start to talk about ideas like whether or not something comes naturally, what comes naturally when we look is that we see, and this is actually something to take comfort in. It's actually a refuge, is that when we look at what we're doing, we see what we're doing, that there really is not much to it in that way, as far as like the ideas and the concepts and such things go, so like when we talk about aggregates or heaps, we talk about this body and other such things like that. When we look and we see in this moment, we see what this body is like. It's like this, same for you. When you look and you see in this moment your body, it's like that, and when we see it like that, we see that knowing is like this, we see that recognition is like this, we see that these activities of constructing things to includes bodies and recognitions and such, they're like this, there's not much there as far as like we're talking about a concept, and really a nice one to pay attention to, a pretty helpful one is this feeling. Well, it's like this, and we talk about three kinds of feeling, about that feeling that's painful, that feeling that's pleasant, and that feeling that's mixed, and so these are the ways that we can start to do stuff with some of these ideas that we hear, heaps and aggregates and such, as we can start to look in this moment and see what's present now. See that, yeah, this body's here. It's like this. That's a thing. There's a body here. And over there's a body. And really, this breath is a body of breath. I can feel it coming in and going out. And, this is actually seeing as well this process that we have of putting things together. We could say making stuff up, putting things in heaps, we could say this body, this mind, that mind, this here, this feeling is like this feeling is like that, this feeling came about because this thing bumped into that thing. There's not a whole lot to it conceptually when you really get down into the investigation. And that's why the discernment, like you had talked about it coming naturally, when we look, we see, and when we hold an intention, we could say that's kind of a repeated thought, we could say, you know, So like this intention to practice, we look and we see what's here right now, and we know that practice at its core is seeing stress and quenching that, stopping that, being done with that, putting it out, and doing that again and again that's practice, so it's really that simple like that. So even when it comes to the heaps, let's look and let's see how does that fit in this moment, the khandhas, the heaps, the aggregates, whatever we want to call them. This stuff is a nice way to say it, these piles of stuff, this pile of knowing, this pile of a body, whatever. It's like this here. And so even when it comes to those concepts and such, let's remember to bring it back to right view. What is noble right viewing? It's looking and seeing. That's our investigation, and it's discernment. It's seeing, hey, does this fit right now? Or is this out of wax? Is this like a wheel that's out of true, and duk, 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 down the road like that? If so, let's stop. Let's true it up. Let's get it right. And then nice and even, nice and cool and calm. So that's the thing that we can use these heaps and such, is to come back to this idea of how to calm them. A lot of people get really caught up in the idea of this is my body. This is, it's doing this and that is bad and it needs to stop. Really, this is often counterproductive when it comes to ideas of calming down, to get really invested in something stopping, to be excited about something stopping, is to really take it forward into the next moment, So to calm something is to go ahead and not take it so personally, So that this body's just like this. Right now, it's got that going on. But I can take a breath and calm. I can do this, do that, the other thing. I don't have to get locked into it. So that's why we talk about those heaps. We talk about them as those heaps that are that people are prone to grasp at. Oh yes, thank you. Take care. Nice to have you. Nice to hang out. That's why we call them those heaps that are prone to grasping. They're prone to being grasped at. These are the things that people love to get excited about, grab at, and carry forward into the next moment. Of course, they fall apart on them. It's not fun. They don't like it, but they do it again and again and again, thinking that's how things are. That's how it has to be. Those people are doing what they have to do rather than what they want to do, because they're not paying attention. That's why we talk about free will not being free, that we pay for that free will with our wise attention. Wise attention, Yoniso Manasikara, is seeing dukkha. That's our wise attention, is can we see the dukkha? So with the khandhas, can we see the dukkha in grasping at things like a body, or at knowing this or that or the other kind of knowing, or anything like that? Can we see that dukkha? Can we see that unwholesome thinking and where that leads to?
Right. And because the word dukkha actually, am I correct in understanding it? It actually comes from this, like it means like a wheel out of kilter kind of thing, right?
That's something I've heard before too. Yes,
Something like
that's
that.
something
I
I've
don't
heard
know.
before
I don't
too.
know if there's truth in that, but
Well, the good news is it's explicitly defined in SN 56.11, and it's explicitly defined, and he states it. He says, in short, the 5 aggregates that everybody grasps at are dukkha. They are stress. And so that's actually really helpful with regards to the practice, which is seeing dukkha and quenching dukkha. Because in other words, he says it elsewhere as something along the lines of, oh, how nice it is to know that everything coming up is just stress coming up, and everything going away is just stress going away. And this is an idea that gets repeated in pop culture too. You hear it in titles of books like Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and It's All Small Stuff. So this is the same idea here. The 5 aggregates that are prone to grasping, that's dukkha, plain and simple. And so what do we want to do? We want to calm down any excitement that is present for them in this moment. Because when we're calm, when we're not excited, we don't hold the things so tightly. We're actually really happy to go ahead and let things go, because we're not operating from a place of, we could say, scarcity.
When you were talking about the kind of ease of it's just like pushing a kid on a swing, it made me think, like, it's come up a couple times where I've been I've got this thought like, oh, wait, can you hear me?
Oh no, I was just waving to the one who chatted, Tom.
Oh,
Take
now
care,
my
Tom.
phone just crashed a little bit.
Oh, okay. Yes, I can hear you still though.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and a couple times it's come up where I've been like very tired in the evening, and I start thinking like, oh man, this Buddhist stuff is hard work. I don't know if this is for me. I want to. I'm gonna just. I'll just take it easy instead. It's like, and
Oh,
then I
good for
think.
you.
Well, and then I think about like well, there's that which is great, but then it's also this thing of like, oh, watching out for dukkha. That's so exhausting. But it's like, you know what else is even more exhausting? Like dealing with dukkha. Like that's
Yeah,
that's even
being
that
stressed out
that's
all the time,
infinitely
right?
harder.
Yeah, as a
Right,
matter
right,
of fact, even the medical industry says that's a killer, right? And
right,
so we
right.
can see that even in common language, that that's a big deal. So that's why we could talk about it as really that's all there really is to worry about. Is we see that
Mm,
dukkha and we chuck it out, see the dukkha and chuck it out now, because chucking out a future dukkha that's not here, it's not helpful. And you
right,
can't
right.
chuck out it's dead and gone. Past dukkha we could let it rot, and not give rise to some new future ghost dukkha, or something like that. And rather, we could just, like we talked about, calmly, easily handle things that are right here, right now, because it's really not much when we come and we take a look. It's really
Mm,
not much. And especially when we see that, oh, it's just some excitement about some things, it's easy to calm that on down, not a problem. And so this is a skillful way of not taking things personally. It's not the extreme way of trying to turn into a ghost being or have some long-term marathon dissociative experience or any other number of changes that are basically just normal changes that get looked at as some kind of helpful woo-woo thing when really they're not you
mm,
know so we can come out of chasing all those ideas around, come out of seeking after some basically something to come along at some point in the future and make me any happier than I am right now. Actually, I'm very happy right now because I know that no thing is ever going to come along at any point in the future and make me any happier than I am right now. And that's a very happy thought to have. That's a very liberating thought to have because there's no dependence upon things coming or going there. It's really nice. That's a place that we can really, really relax. So this is why
mm,
the Buddha
mm.
talks often about not taking things personally. Need more cheddar. So one of the things that dukkha helps with is to remember to quench dukkha. That's the number one helper that dukkha gives us. Because someone in the chat asked, dukkha helps sometimes as well, right? Dukkha helps thinking about bad things, protects you from dangerous things. So if it will go all away, then you're very unsafe, right? So what we could say is when somebody is stressed out, they're not seeing clearly. So whether things are dangerous or safe is more easily seen, more clearly seen when one is calm, when one is not stressed out. It's why adults are much, much better at seeing whether or not things are dangerous than children. Children will get excited about things and they'll do foolish things. And so when we think about things like that, we can see whether something is dangerous or safe without stress being present as a quality in the moment. It does not need to be there.
So as you talk about the three feelings: liking, disliking, and the mixed bag, right? So
Yes.
this not liking feeling is dukkha, and
Yes, we could say
my
pleasant and
understanding is,
painful.
yeah. So this
Hmm.
painful feeling is a dukkha, and my understanding is this is something which we are constructing. The mind is creating it, and to get out of the dukkha is to create the another kind of feeling, right? So we can create it just by the breath or looking what is positive currently or
Yeah.
seeing what is not there, and we are worrying about it. So that's so would you agree with that part?
What I would say is that's why the Buddha praised the changing of that feeling, of the pleasant, painful,
Mm,
and mixed feeling. One of the reasons that we do that is because we talk about how things change when we calm down. Again, the feelings, these are the three feelings. These are one of those five aggregates that we're talking about as dukkha to begin with. So we know that they're not worth taking personally, that they're not anything that's going to be constant, that they're going to come and go. And because they're going to come and go, when we grasp at them, it sucks. That's our anicca, dukkha, anatta, like the kitty. And so when we see that and we see the feelings in terms of that as well, that things that are anicca, they hurt when we grasp at them. To include these feelings, whether they're painful, pleasant, or mixed, it doesn't matter. The content is irrelevant. The thing itself is not the problem. It's the getting excited about it, grasping at it, clinging to it, carrying forth with it, doing all of these things to try and maintain something. So when we talk about feeling like that, it's wonderful to take a breath, calm down the excitement that we might have about feeling. A lot of times painful feeling, for example, persists a heck of a lot longer in the mind than the body. We can see that when people carry on about a stubbed toe or something else like this, whereas someone that maybe kicks something because they're not paying attention, they take a deep breath and calm down the excitement. They can look at the toe. Is it actually hurt? They can actually take care of things in that moment, rather than going ahead and attempting to swip swap, like we were talking about swip swapping. So a changing of feeling in this way, we could say, is an escape from being excited about a feeling. It's a very simple feeling. We have nothing there to get excited about, nothing there to really crave. Painful feeling is like this, pleasant feeling is like this, mixed feeling is like this. And so there's not really anything there to get excited about and we could say carry on with. Rather, there's just that moment, that feeling to be dealt with just like it is, and really it comes up and goes just fine all on its lonesome, doesn't really need my help at all. So this is a way that we can see that calming of that excitement leads to escaping, we could say being a slave to feeling, because very often liking, disliking, and being confused about things is a way that we could also talk about those three feelings when they are of the mental nature, pushing on experience, pulling on experience, or running circles around it like a chicken with its head cut off because it's a mixed bag and we don't know what to do with it. We don't know if we like it or we hate it. Oftentimes that leads to that behavior of knocking it into one camp or another. And you can see that this just keeps the whole thing going. So when we calm down the excitement about the feeling, we deal with it just like it is. Oh, hey, there's a pleasant feeling. How nice it is to have pleasant feeling here right now. And this is how we can start to do things like for ourselves in how we look at the world, we could say we are defining pleasure differently, because to be free of wanting this feeling present here in this moment to be any different from how it is right now, that's very pleasant. That's the pleasant that Buddhadasa Bhikkhu talks about when he talks about ending hunger. So rather than being hungry for a new kind of feeling or for a change or for a persistence of the same feeling, we can look and we can see that there's great pleasure, great freedom in the freedom from wanting to have this feeling be different from how it is right now.
Right, but also my understanding previously, I was practicing a lot with Goenka method, was to whatever feelings you have, you just keep observing them. But what I learned with Dhammarato is you also are doing a
Change
very
them.
active role, and you are
Yeah.
changing it, right? So this
Yes.
is a part. And what I'm
Yes.
understanding from you is after a while, if you start doing it successful, you're becoming successful in changing from pain to pleasure. Later on, the things becomes quite easy. Just maybe a lot of pain is coming from this painful feeling because you think you're a slave of them. You think, okay, now they are there and they're gonna persist. But if you
Yeah,
know you
that's
are
a good
not,
way
you
to
can
put it.
change them easily. It's just yeah,
Yeah, because you think that they're going to persist. You're not seeing that,
yeah.
when painful feeling is here, pleasant and mixed feeling or not. They're not like this. They're not this persisting thing. So even that mixed feeling, when we look very closely at it, we can see it's a quick changing. And so when we look and we see the feeling for what it is, something that is mind made, it's constructed, it's put together in this moment, it's a sankhara. So we know that all those are anicca. You know what I mean? We know they're all inconstant. We know they're all nothing to rely upon, nothing to invest in, anything like that. And we know that they're all dukkha, like we talked about very explicitly in SN 5611. He states that the five khandhas are dukkha. In short, five khandhas prone to grasping, dukkha. Feeling is one of those khandhas. And when we don't grasp at feeling, it's very easy to change it. Very, very easy,
Mm.
because we're not going ahead and making it this big deal anymore. We're dealing with it just like it is, just here in this moment. And so then things become very easy that way. Very simple, we could say. And simple. I find simple to be less effortful. I think that's likely to be a common finding, but
I was listening to a one of the Sangha calls the other day, and I think it was you, Ivan, who said something about how we don't need to like dig down deep into these things. We just take what's on the surface, because it's all on the surface, really. Like and that really made things feel a whole lot
Yes.
easier for me. Like it's not like I have to. Oh, I have all these predilections towards different things, and I got to really dig down and rip them out. But really, it's just like that stuff isn't what I'm engaged in right now. The stuff I'm engaged in right now is the stuff that's right on the surface. Much easier to grab
Yes.
that. It's floating up on the surface. Hmm.
Yes. And all that other stuff, when you don't dig it up, when you don't pick it up again, you let it rot. You let it fall apart. You let it do what it was naturally doing anyway. And so when you're right there, right then, you can see it. You can see right there. Does it make sense to dig deep? No, I've got these things here to deal with right now. These things here are plenty good enough. I don't actually have to go, we could say I don't have to go looking for trouble. It's
Right,
not a
right.
thing that I need to
Exactly.
find. Yeah, I don't need to go on the
Exactly.
search. Yeah.
I'm not going to go walk into a bad neighborhood and.
Exactly. Yeah. Plenty good right here, So that's a very nice way to think about it.
You got some questions in the chat, Alex, about dukkha.
We could say it's stress or dissatisfaction, Shay. That's a good way to say it. Stress, dissatisfaction.
Hey Alex, uh,
Hello.
I remember there is some sentence that I think I used to use it with Ivan. It's something talking about we all choose our own. It start with the S. I don't know. Samsara, Sankhan. I don't. I'm not sure which one. Like me and Ivan, we talk about it. We choose our own dukkha. I'm not sure. Like, it's not dukkha. It's like samsara.
Hmm.
Do you think it's samsara? Like,
The word
I
sankara?
sankara. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
could talk about sankara as a construction or
No,
putting
like we all
together.
choose our own. How do we say this? Like, even if we think we don't ask for this, but we still choose it anyway. So we kind of choose our own dukkha. We choose
Yeah,
our own samsara.
bake it right
I
in.
kind of um, I think I used to say that before. I think Shay will get it if I can recall it.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah. Give me a second. Let me think.
Yeah, choice to choose is a good way to put it. When we pay attention, we have the ability to choose. Yeah, we have the ability to do something different. So if we're bringing up a lot of stress, when we pay attention, we have the opportunity to quench that stress. We have the opportunity to stop doing that.
Also, is Dhammarato sick today?
Yes, he is not feeling well.
I see.
It would
Oh
be
yeah,
good for
hey,
us
Ivan,
to
Ivan.
go ahead and send him.
I have this question. I want to ask if you can remember. I
Oh,
talked with you long ago.
No, we
Uh,
all
yeah.
yeah, because well,
Uh,
the unwholesome state of mind will always feed on something. So when
I
every,
okay.
every time we say stuff like I don't have a choice, or we say stuff like like it's the same old thing, just all those kind of helpless words, where you actually are choosing that. Like if you're feeling bad and you have a story of this is something that people do upon me, and but actually your mind wants to go that direction. You want to, but it depends if you can see it. So dukkha is an addiction. Suffering is an addiction. Dissatisfaction is an addiction. Stress is an addiction. But that depends on you if you can see it. But so over here when you practice anapanasati, wholesome state of mind, you are giving your mind other options. It's like there is other way out. I think Daniel people talked last few weeks ago about creativity and playfulness, that kind of thing. Like you are thinking outside the box because dukkha is trapped in the box. It's like a very comfortable jail cell. I think that was what I was saying. If you ask, because I can't remember what I said a few weeks ago.
Yeah, that was a good one, Ivan. That suffering, dukkha is an addiction. So this is how I feel now. Coming out of the addiction, this is how I felt. Like mind is going back into those rolling thoughts
Mm-hmm.
about past arguments, and it just feels like an addiction.
Yeah, and it's very funny. I had a talk with Cattell yesterday. Oh no, was it yesterday? Can't remember. A few days ago. Like I overhear in this experience, sometimes certain craving or addictions. It's like at some point I don't know what happened. It suddenly it start fighting back. It's almost like it knows that I no longer want it, and it's like giving this last resistance, throwing everything in my direction to get me distracted. I thought it's very interesting actually. But it makes sense. I'm not surprised. I trained this activity for a long time. Why am I surprised? Yeah.
Definitely.
Alex, what was the theme of this talk? I thought it's
Oh, we talked about remorse, but luckily we abandoned it pretty quickly. And so we had some remorse and regret up front, but we got that out of the way and we started talking about practice and being happy and being okay. So it was really nice. We did a really good job, crew.
all right. I will go. I will go now because I still
Take
have
care, sheep.
I still have to do the Chinese New Year. The
Oh, have
house, the
fun.
oh,
family do it today. Yeah.
that's fun.
Enjoy.
Man,
Okay. I have to go now.
take it easy, dude. Bye bye.
Take
Yeah.
care.
But
But yes, it was that. We talked about formal and informal. Actually, we didn't really touch on that one quite as much. We talked about it in different words. We talked about it in words that I've found to be really helpful. So rather than thinking of things as formal and informal, we talk about being in physical seclusion, being out of physical seclusion. And so then we see that there's not really an informal time to practice, but rather we can practice like this when things are like this, and then we can use that as a helpful, we could say, boost, a way to get nice and calm, like we talked about, for 5-6 times per day and go ahead and see how it is that the mind kicks up a kerfluffle again. And we do that getting into and out of physical seclusion like that. So that was the way that we talked about formal and informal practice.
This is a little bit off topic, but it's something I've heard before that I really liked was this student asks his teacher. He says, "Can I smoke while I study the Dharma?" And the teacher is like, "No, of course not." And then the student asks, "Can I study the Dharma while I'm smoking?" And he says, "Yeah, of course you can."
Yeah, that's right. Never a bad time to pay attention. Always good to remember to pay attention. And it's something that the Buddha talked about and praised really highly, developing the quality of wakefulness, of heedfulness, of diligence, of remembering to do it again and again. And he said that, no other quality that he knows of, gives rise to wholesome qualities and sustains them as much as that quality of heedfulness, diligence. Same with the opposite too. When we're lax in that way, when we're not diligent, he said no other quality he knows of gives rise to unwholesome qualities, and sustains them. So diligence is something that we can remember and keep in mind often. We can cultivate and develop it again and again without the stress, without needing to beat up on ourselves or do some sort of extreme action or something like this. And in doing so, we're relaxing those old habits, those old habits of bonking on ourselves again and again.
So the diligence is sati, right? This is
Sati?
quality of sati, to remember.
To remember, yes, yeah, to keep in mind, to recall. Yep. To keep in mind the Dhamma, to remember the Dhamma, to remember to practice. Anybody have any other thoughts? We've been going about 1:15 now. I figure that's about a good time to wrap it. We can start talking in a circle like we normally do about what it is we spoke on today. I'd love to hear what anybody has to think.
Yeah, I can speak on the remorse, regret kind of thing, and the future planning, worrying about future dukkha. Yeah, it was very helpful, Alex, to kind of put it into the frame of, I can always only catch dukkha right now. So worrying about if I'm going to be able to do that in the future, that's just more dukkha right now that I got
That's
to
just
catch.
dukkha. Yeah.
And if
Right.
yeah,
Can I see that? Yep.
yeah. And it's like Tom said as well, if I'm worrying about, oh, am I going to be able to keep myself wholesome next Friday? Like, what
Yeah.
really matters is between Monday and Thursday. If I'm doing it then I can do it on Friday too.
Yes, and that's the confidence that comes of doing it directly. When we quench dukkha and we see that oh yeah, I did that, that's when we get confident about it. That's what we could talk about as, again, it's knowing what is and is not that path right here, right now. Because the path looks like this right now. What's it going to look like on Friday? I don't know. I don't care. I'll deal with it when it's here. Right now the path is like this. And so that's a great way to think of it, is what matters is what's here right now. Just like any path you're walking on, you want to look at where you're at right here, right now, or you're going to walk right off the path one way or another. And so it's really coming back to just paying attention and dealing with just this moment, because that's all that we ever have to deal with. A lot of people say it like we just talked about, it's all we ever can deal with. And yeah, that's nice. That's a nice reframe. But man, think of the relief that's present in, wow, all I ever have to deal with is right here, right now. That's it. I don't ever have to go and do anything else other than deal with reality as it is right here, right now. And that can become, again, one of those wholesome thoughts to practice with in and of itself, because that's a thought that leads to calming right now, to peace right now. Yeah, all I ever can deal with is right now. Man, that's really nice that that's all that I have to deal with. Wow, how nice that is.
Wow.
Oh, hi, CV.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Good morning. Nice to see you too. Who do we still have here? Eunice, are you here?
Yes, I'm
What are you
here.
thinking, friend? What do you got?
Yeah, about the remorse, like the initial topic, and also the non-judgment. I was also thinking that sometimes I think you said it also, like, but we didn't talk about it much about doubt, because sometimes there is like this. The hindrance of doubt is very strong there. Maybe like, why am I worrying about what I did yesterday? Like, I'm worrying about, oh, was it good or was it bad? Because there is this the idea of non-harm, and maybe I'm like having doubt about something I did, and I'm not sure, like, was it harmful or non-harmful? Like, it's all right. Sometimes we're humans. We make like some messy things. Maybe, oh, I didn't say hello to the cashier. Was that harmful or not harmful? And then like I can worry about that.
Yes, and you
Yeah,
can
like
see
how.
how when we talk about doubt, we're talking again about calming that down, because one of the ways we could talk about doubt is as a kind of a fear that we're not going to get it right, and so
Yeah,
when we see that, we can calm it, like with the cashier, because how do we really know whether or not something harmful or non-harmful? We look and we see what's here right now, and so even with the cashier, we can look and we see as we're walking home, well, I don't know, was that harmful? Well, not right here, right now. I'm walking home. I'm safe, secure, comfortable.
mm,
And so this is a way that we can calm that fear. And how do we know if it was harmful to the cashier? Well, if it's a cashier that we see often enough to care about whether or not, something that we said or didn't say is harmful, we'll probably see them again, and so then there's the opportunity when that comes to look and see again, and that's when we can go ahead and handle whatever there at that time. But again, it doesn't mean that we're invalidating any ideas about concern or anything like that. We're not having to. What doing is calming down that excitement that brings forth that fear, because again, it's an excitement about things. In this way, it's an excitement about getting things right, and we can see
yeah,
that, and we can see the heat that comes with that, we could say, and we could cool things down by flipping that calm switch, turning down the juice, just letting it calm,
mm,
relax, like a wind up toy as it runs out, rather than grabbing it and winding it back up, we let it wind down, let it wind out, say, oh yeah, that was fun, that was nice. Now we've got this rest. Now if there's, something with the cashier, when I see him next, I talk to the cashier then, you know. I don't carry them around in my mind as a problem for 20 hours or however long until I see them again. I know that that is not coming from that place of being okay. That's being worried about those kinds of things that, as of right now, not a problem. So as we deal with things one by one as they occur, those kinds of complications that we think are, like we were talking about earlier with these distractions, we think they're a problem to solve. We think, oh, was it harmful? Was it not harmful? We think this is a problem to solve, but it's not. It's actually a distraction to go ahead and
mhm.
swoop, let go of, abandon, and if it comes back up, we abandon it again. If I have doubt about this, that, or the other thing, I don't have to worry about that right now. I don't have to get it right. So I don't have to think like that right now. I can go ahead and let things be nice and calm, not a big much to do about nothing, because most
Yeah.
likely the
It's
cashier is
maybe
fine,
it's yeah, maybe it comes from also like a wrong grasp of non-harm, and like you hold it as a rule, and then therefore like
Yes.
you start doing these things, like you or like, oh, I should not. harm. And so like if
Yeah.
I make mistakes or whatever, like I'm gonna
Right. Then I
because
have to
that's
harm
how
myself
rules
to
are
make sure I
enforced.
pay attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we don't want to do that anymore. Right. Yeah, we want different actually place it. So that's why looking at things like sankappa as an attitude, or we could say a mood, because things like the kind of vibes we're throwing off come forth from our mood. So if we're in a nice, happy, positive, calm, composed, kind of collected mood, then everything that's going to come forth from that is going to resemble these qualities, these characteristics, because they're going to be born of that. That's what we mean when we say mind is the forerunner to all these things. Cognition it precedes all this existence, we could say. And so when we come about and we get that cognition in the right, which we could say is the harmonious way, I guess, the way that fits with what's here right now, then we really get to see what is harmful and not harmful. Because what was harmful 5 minutes ago, maybe not harmful now. What was not harmful 5 minutes ago, may be harmful now. You walk 5 minutes towards a forest fire, likely you're closer to harm than further away, and it's evident when you look and see that could be the case, and so then to change direction, but you don't know that if you're not paying attention, so that's how people will drive themselves right into those things and get caught there, excitement, a lot of clouded things,
Yeah, that's very new to me. I mean, because the only way I've held these, like I've held rules, was like through punishment. Like if
Yes.
there is a rule, or you don't, you're not supposed to be loud or jump in the bed, like you get punished, and they're like, oh, like we're gonna punish you, so you'll remember not to do it again. Like that's, and so I kind of like do it to myself also. It's like I see I
Yes.
did something that was not optimal, or maybe I have doubts about it, and so like the mind just like kind of bites itself, thinking that it will help in the future. To not
Yes,
do that
right.
again.
And that's why the calming is so nice, because when we calm that bubby down, so it's not so excitable, it doesn't run around hurting itself anymore because it's confused, then things can become really nice and simple again, because we're not fighting with ourselves. That's why we talk a lot about making friends with ourselves, warts and all. That's that idea again of non-judgment. That's the idea again of coming from that place of this is good enough as it is. And that way we're not shying away from any of it or attempting to suppress or repress or avoid or anything. We can just handle those things as they come up.
Yeah. If I hold it as a view, it seems to go in contrast with non-harm. Like accepting myself with warts and all. If that's like a view, and also like non-harm is a view, then they're in contrast, because it's like words and all, but not the word of harm.
Well, I guess one way we could talk about harm would be conflict as well. So that's one way that we could think about, because conflict comes forth from that same excitement we talk. And so accepting oneself, warts and all, is to allow things to be as they are, even if that wart is something harmful, because when we see it, then we recognize it. A wart, for example, when we recognize one of the things that's recommended by any medical professional is to go ahead and keep an eye on it. Does it get bigger? Does it change color? Does it change shape? These sorts of things are indicators that the doctor wants to know about that kind of a thing. So even with harmful things, harmful activities, we have a lot of harmful activities. Stress is harmful. Like I said, the medical industry says stress is a killer. So stress is harmful. And so when we look at it in that way, we can get down to the root of it rather than to beat around the bush up here with all these things that we need to fix. What do you think, Mr. Ben?
Hey, thanks for hosting the talk today, Alex. It's been really nice to listen to. May have fallen asleep for the majority of it, but for the part that I caught.
Enjoyable enough. Love it.
Yeah, nice to hang out and talk Dhamma.
Yes, sir.
And yeah, diligence, as you talked about. Diligence is remembering, like, if a mathematician is diligent, they remember the maths that they've learned.
I like that.
The same way, if an engine is diligent, they can remember when they're building a bridge to apply the engineering they've learned to ensure that the bridge probably won't fall down. It's the same way, just remembering to apply what's been practiced at the right times, and enjoy it.
That.
Yeah,
Enjoy
be a
it.
happy, diligent practitioner. Diligent can have a dry tone to it, like, yeah, enjoyably diligent.
I really like the way Dhammarato phrases it as it's not that you have to practice all the time, it's that you have to practice whenever you remember. I think that's so good, because it's such a subtle point, but it's so important, I think, because, in the past, when I've tried all these different techniques, and I mean, whatever it might be, anything I'm sort of employing to improve my life, whatever, I end up telling myself, okay, I got to do this all the time. And then you're just setting yourself up for failure, because
That's right.
every time you're not doing it, then when you do remember, then you're like, no, I messed it up. But whenever you
Yep.
remember, that's much nicer, because it's like, yeah, and then you remember more and more often, automatically. So it's it's a very
Yeah.
subtle point, but very, very important, I think.
Very helpful, right? Very helpful.
Yeah, we can be gentle with ourselves. Like, if you decide to go on a diet, and you might eat healthily for the week, and then get invited out, or you go around to a friend's house and like, oh, I baked this really nice cake. If you want some, and yeah, why not have a piece of cake, and then you don't need to be like, oh no, I had a piece of cake, but I'm on a diet. I can't eat cake. Be like, yeah, it's all right. Anytime you remember that you're on a diet, you can apply the diet, and if not, well, you can enjoy the piece of cake.
Doesn't really help to have
No.
the thoughts of, oh no, I ate the cake. I
Mm.
mean, it doesn't do anything really, other than make you feel bad.
Yeah, just hurts.
Yeah.
Just another unwholesome thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hello,
Just some
Scott.
What a nice.
hello.
Hey, Scott.
Some dukkha right there, man.
Mhm.
You just gotta see it's dukkha. This is dukkha, and then get rid of it. Yeah.
Be done. Mr. Dan, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I was wondering about thoughts of the future. Like, if you really have to do stuff like taxes, and every time you touch this thought, you definitely have to cut, or you're like fly away from it and try to push it back. And I understand that is, of course, not smart. But so you are happy in the moment, and then when you finally do the taxes, you do them, right? But still, this pushing back probably does not help with reducing dukkha overall. So what do you do with this stuff?
Makes
You
sense,
have to.
right? So here's the way that I like to think about it, is quite simply, a lot of people, when they're sitting on the couch doing whatever, watching television, have a thought, oh, I have to do the dishes. This is a very cumbersome thought. I have to do this. It sucks. I have to do it. That means that I have to stop watching the TV. That means that I have to. Da, 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 da. You see, this is a big old mess. It's really big and tangled up. You know, and so when we take a moment and calm things down, though, it actually is quite clear that in fact I do want to do the dishes. Do I want to do them right then? Well, not really. I don't really care, but I do see that the longer that I wait to do them, the more there's a chance that bugs will come. The more there's a chance that the crud will set, that it'll be a little harder to do. The more the chance that the government will come and fine me, you know, and say, hey, you did your taxes late, whatever. I see all of this stuff very clearly. It's very evident to me that, in fact, I do want to do the dishes. And not just that, but I can pause the television, come back to the television, not ever watch the television again. That doesn't actually have any impact on whether or not I want to do the thing that's smart to do right now. You know, and when I see that the thing that I want to do is actually smart right now, I don't feel bad about it. I don't feel bad about it because you know what I actually do want are clean dishes. You know, I don't want a fine from the government. I don't want jail time. You know, I don't want a disruption to livelihood that not only me, maybe someone else, you know, this cat, he's got to eat, you know, that sort of thing. I don't want that, you know. And so very clearly when I calm down this idea of I don't wanna by just taking this breath and letting it be like it is, okay, yeah. Even if I have to think it out, I want to do the dishes, I want to do the taxes, you know. So what is actually precluding someone from doing something that they want to do other than something along the lines of, we could say, confusion? For example, one of the reasons that we put things off that hurt, like taxes, is because we have a silly idea that somehow, some way, this time it's going to be different. No, it's not. You know, it's not going to be any different. So if we calm down,
What do you mean?
well, we could
This
say
time it
that,
will be different.
well, we could say that nobody puts off their taxes like that again and again and again, thinking that they're going to get an ultimate relief. They know they're doing the same thing again and again. They're putting off something that's hard to do, which is quite simply calming down, you know, whatever it is that is, we could say, throwing a fit in that moment, that's saying, no, 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 I don't wanna, you know, pushing on the idea of taxes or dishes or something like that. You know, so then this idea of I'm going to get away with it is seen very clearly as not true. You know, we're not actually going to do that. If we don't do the dishes, they will in fact pile up. There will not be clean dishes. There will be bugs. There will be crud. There will be mold. There will be all other, not just that, but the next time I go to eat, I won't have a dish to eat. You know, so these are very clear things that when we're not thinking something silly, you know, like this time is the time that I'm going to put it off and it's going to be okay. And never mind, there's literally just historical precedent, legal precedent, all of these sorts of things, very plain to see when we investigate. You know, a lot of people think they're going to be the ones that get away with it. And so they put the things off. And when they get the slap, they're upset about it. You know, when knowing full well the whole time, you know, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. So calming down that process of activity that is just distraction. Even if you're saying you're just putting it off, what that is a distraction from what's here right now to be dealt with, you know, because if the taxes don't actually have to be dealt with at this moment, who cares? File them at the last minute, do them at the last minute out the door. You know, that's actually probably not a problem for the majority of things. You know, a lot of the
Oh,
reason that people
actually,
put things off is they make a really big deal out of it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, they don't put you in jail. They just appraise you, and then you pay more. So they don't do that.
Just commit tax fraud, man.
See, you said they appraise you. Is that what you said? As in, like, what they find? They want money.
Yeah,
they
they
audit
just
you.
like estimate, put a higher number, and then they deduct that from you. So you actually, yeah, it's not that you go to jail, right? But still, you lose money.
Yes, right. So it's still not in your best interest. It's not actually in line with your intention of taking care of things, taking care of yourself, of being
Yes,
okay.
definitely.
It's actually, we could say, self-destructive, harmful behavior. You know, and
Mhm.
so if we see that and we calm that down, it's really easy to knock out the taxes. You know, it's really easy to do the dishes. When we could say put first things first. So when we get into a state of composure, a state of okay, happy to be here right now, can handle this stuff gladly, you know, with ease, with confidence, then it's not so much of a problem anymore. We see that the procrastination is just another one of those activities that we don't actually have to fix it. You know, we just stop doing it. and do the thing that makes sense, whether it's the dishes or the taxes or the school. A lot of people talk to me about schoolwork, I have schoolwork and I don't want to do it. No, actually, you're going to school. You want to go to school, right? Yes. Well, then you want to do the schoolwork, right? You want to pass the courses. Yes. Okay, excellent. So then the problem is not anything logical. So it doesn't make any more time spent thinking on it, worthwhile, because we see really clearly that the action that is in line with the intention that's being held is like this and not like that, and so at that point, it's not a matter of, okay, can I think about it more or figure out a different way to think about it? It's a matter of, let me take a deep breath and do the thing that makes sense, and it's not, it doesn't require willpower, because it's a matter of calming down those ideas of resistance to begin with. So I would say that that's what we're talking about when we're talking about dealing with that
Big
everyday
part is
kind
actually
of stress.
it's the part is the pain that you feel, like when you even touch the thought, then
You're
you feel the
touching a
pain.
thought of taxes. It's not actually that painful. That's a part of changing it, is looking and seeing, hey, not that painful. I can handle that, So we replace this
Mhm.
idea of doubt, the doubt of I can't handle the painful feeling, with the idea of confidence. Taxes aren't that painful. They're probably electronic. Probably can't even get a paper cut these days, So let us look and see, like, what is this? Is this actually maybe just some kind of a mixed feeling? Because you know what? It actually feels okay to do the taxes as well, knowing that you're not going to get assessed into the higher tax bracket, that you're not going to lose money. So again, it's a mixed
Mhm.
thing, So rather than being confused about it, we can quite simply say, hey, we don't have to be self-destructive and we don't have to be perfectionist. We can just get it done and take care of it now, And so then we don't sit there having the thoughts about the painful mental feeling of taxes, because that's what's painful, is thinking about doing the taxes. Doing the taxes, so
Yes.
simple, so easy. It's practically given to you. And for the
How are
most part,
these
go ahead.
sorry, how are these kind of mixed feelings approached compared to thoughts and feelings that are just straight up unwholesome? Like
Well,
like the example uh, this was in the same Sangha call I was listening to the other day, talking about um, thinking about how I got to go to the bank. Like it's not really like unwholesome per se, but it's just kind of like a mix, like but then thinking about going to the bank all the time is like kind of unnecessary, I guess. But yeah, I suppose like so these kind of like mixed feelings, like do you just drop them as well? Or?
Just see them as they are, just as mixed feeling, And so that's the thing of it when we look at feelings, because we're talking about two different kind of things here. When we're looking at feelings, we're looking at quite simply things that are painful, they're pleasant, or they're mixed. When they
Mm,
touch, we have a painful bodily feeling, a pleasant bodily feeling, a mixed bodily feeling. We have painful and pleasant and mixed mental feelings. These are ways that we can think about that. And so when we look at them like that, what we're doing is we're looking at them and we're seeing that they're just like this. So if there's a painful mental feeling about taxes, well, we can see I'm doing that. Okay. And as soon as we see I'm doing that, we can relax that activity. We can go ahead and we can change that out. We don't have to go ahead and think about it in a way that is painful. Rather we can think about it in a way that has ease to it, and with that ease, that painful feeling, it's allowed to change. It's allowed to be
mm,
just like it is rather than trying to manipulate it way or change it into this, that, or the other. And so when we talk about
yeah.
feeling like that, especially when it comes to some idea, when we have ideas that make contact with the mind, there's a feeling there that does take place, that is that part of that experience is that feeling that is pleasant, painful, or mixed, Again, with taxes, probably doing the taxes. Well, most likely, when we look at that feeling, it's probably a case of a mixed feeling, because what else? Some
Mm.
other people are happy to get a tax return, I guess, some people are happy to save a little money or something like that. So maybe for them, it's not the same, and so even then we can see that this is not something that's constant, this is something that's taken place right now because of what's here right now. It's not anything to take personally, again, with like
Mm,
the,
mm.
if we take personally the painful mental feeling of the taxes or the dishes, then we avoid it, we put it off, we're aversive towards it, and all of a sudden we are either paying more money or we're cleaning up bugs, you know on the dishes that we didn't do, or the neighbor is telling us we're sloppy, some other such thing. But really what I'm saying here is when we take that painful feeling personally, we start to go ahead and try to maintain what it is that we want rather than things as they are. We start to really appropriate, personalize things. This painful feeling about these taxes, I have to put off doing the thing that's smart to me. We hear about it a lot in terms of, say, like long-term, like depressive thinking. If only I felt better. Oh, I feel so miserable. So I'm not going to get out of bed, do the physical activity, take the shower, what have you. And we can see that these are part and parcel of what we would call like a depressive state. As a person basically putting off things that are in their best interest again and again and again because of we could say grasping at and clinging to feeling, wanting this feeling to be different from how it is. Sometimes we have a painful mental feeling come up, but as the calm person, we can see that we can handle that feeling just fine. It's no problem and still do the thing, and that's part of practicing that calming, is that we see that feeling is not worth getting excited about, not worth taking personally. That rather it's much smarter, much more wise, we could say, to do the taxes, to do the dishes, to just clean up what we can right here, right now, and be done with it, rather than drag it out, or carry forward with it.
Right. Yeah, dishes is a good example, actually. I drag my feet on that a lot.
Right?
And then
Yeah, right.
I look at why am I actually dragging my feet? Like, it's
Yeah.
really not bad washing the dishes.
Yeah.
Like,
And not just that, but it's nice to have
asshole.
clean dishes, Same with
Yeah,
the
exactly.
taxes.
Yeah.
When we have the thought
Yeah.
of the painful taxes, we can swap it out and think of actually very pleasant to have the taxes done, to not have to think about the taxes anymore because they're donezo. Same with the dishes. I don't have to think in the back of my mind, oh, well, I'm going to do this thing, then I do the dishes. No, they're done. That's just one less thing that I'm carrying around. So when we talk about making that wholesome change, waking up and looking at what we're doing, making a wholesome change, we're talking about making a wholesome change to action, the action of thought, action of speech, action of the body. And so that's why even talking about the bar, walking out of the bar is, Dhamma practice. When we don't want to be in the bar intoxicated and we leave the bar, this is the wholesome change. This is anapanasati. So we don't want to, this is why I talked about formal and informal more in means of we're in physical seclusion rather than whether or not we're thinking a certain thing, because you can see here that thinking of anapanasati as, something to be done not at the bar. Well, the bar is where the dukkha is, in the story here. You know what I mean? So we practice then, so at that point, anapanasati, the first tetrad is move the legs of the body out of the, and so then that way, wow, now look at that. We've got into a different environment, and that can help us a lot with changing the attitude. So you can see that these 16 steps, they're not this sequential 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Rather, they're more like when this note plays, we do this dance move, so when we see it come up like this, we do that. When we see it come up like that, we do this, and we do that with our feelings and our body and our perceptions, our thoughts. How we're looking at things is part of that practice like that. And so when we practice right now. And that's the biggest thing about it, whether we're practicing doing the taxes or washing the dishes or walking out of the bar.
Yeah, thoughts can be improved. Like if there's what we might call mixed thoughts, like mixed thoughts often go into unwholesome thoughts just because of thought patterns and spiraling down. And if we see there's mixed thoughts about going to the bank, we can choose to just think how nice it is to go to the bank. It's nice to get your money sorted, nice to have a walk, have a chat with the cashier. Like, there's lots of nice things about going to the bank. In the same way with the taxes, like, can literally the practice is to choose to think wholesome thoughts. And what's a wholesome thought about doing taxes? Well, there's nothing inherently painful associated with doing taxes. Like if you ask any tax accountant, like some of them won't enjoy their work, but some will. Like it is possible to enjoy doing taxes. If it's possible for person A, it's also possible for this mind to enjoy doing taxes too, but we have to choose to enjoy what we're doing right now. The practice is literally to see what we're doing right now and to enjoy doing it. Like anything, taxes, banking, washing dishes, anything is enjoyable if we choose to enjoy it. It's realizing that we have a choice, which is freeing, and then having the awareness and putting in a little bit of right effort here and now. And then you can enjoy any task in the world that comes up.
Yes. Christina says she'll do her taxes.
Yeah. And I think, you know, if you can enjoy doing your taxes, you can enjoy really anything.
Oh yeah, right. And that's the nice thing about skill generalization. You know,
You're right,
once
right.
once we start seeing, hey, this is the skill that we can develop, we can do it right now again and again, we start to take that skill, we generalize it. Taxes, dishes, breathing, you know, loss, gain, all that stuff can go and have that skill of being okay generalized. You know, all of those activities can be done with that calm and that ease. That's why I talk about that, you know, anapanasati. You know, it's not something that we're going to do at a special time in a special place. We're going to do it right here, right now, wherever that happens to be, you know, whenever we can remember to. And I like that you brought up as a reminder to all of us as well that often is good enough. You know, that all of the time is just another way to to beat ourselves up with the rule police, like Eunice said.
Right, right.
Timo, nice to see you.
Hey, Timo.
Hey guys, nice to see you as well.
Went about a little bit there. I myself, friends, I'm gonna hop off and have myself a rest for a little bit. I really appreciate hanging out with everybody. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
And I
Good
don't
night.
know how
Thanks,
to
Alex.
Thank you
turn
very
off
much.
the recorder.
Yeah, we don't have Mikey here to
I'll
do
do
the
it.
little sign off.
Okay.
But thanks
Yeah.
very much, Alex. That was great.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Rest
I
well.
appreciate you all. I'll talk to you again soon.
Take care, buddy.
Thanks, man. Take
So,
care.
bye bye.
Bye, everyone.